Hi. Recently somebody contacted me and he told me that he'd been watching a movie where he saw what he thought might be an unrealistic portrayal of a flare gun. And he asked if I had any input on what would be realistic results for a flare gun in that situation. And the answer is, I have very little input on that. While in the military, I shot flares out of an M203 grenade launcher, and I fired the old pop-up flares, but as far as shooting the little orange flare gun, I had never fired one. So I went out and bought the Orion Coastal Alerter Signal Kit. It comes with a nice carrying case, it's got a signal mirror and a whistle, and it has this orange single-shot break-action 12-gauge flare gun with this nice attachment to hold your extra flares. But if you tried to use something like this for anti-personnel purposes, what kind of results would you get? Let's see if we can shed some light on that. I'll shoot this target from 7 yards and we'll see how accurate this flare gun can be. But there's two things we have to keep in mind. One, remember it doesn't actually have sights, and two, we're in the middle of a big dry lake bed and we do have firefighting equipment with us. So please don't panic. So we're going to do three things simultaneously. One, see how accurately I can shoot it. Two, see how much recoil there is. And three, see how I get the empty casing out after I've fired it because there's no extractor or ejector. So let's give it a whirl. Oh, and it just falls out pretty easily. Now we're going to go chase down that flare. And here's what the flare looks like after it lands on the ground. And now we'll try a couple more shots. Yes, out of habit, I reach into my pocket. And you just have to dump the empty casing out. Now, after we chase down that flare, we'll take a look at the group. As far as accuracy, down here's where one of the wads hit. We see a couple of flare impacts, and as far as I can tell, a couple of them went over, even though I was aiming down here. So the accuracy is very poor. If you were going to try to shoot anything with it, you better be awfully close. But even if you were close, could this thing do any real damage to a large animal? Let's see if we can put that to the test. To demonstrate the effectiveness of a particular type of firearm or a particular type of ammo, I'll usually use the meat target. Now pay attention as some of the meat target components have changed. The meat target is pork ribs followed by a bag of oranges to simulate lung tissue, more pork ribs on the back, and 4 layers of t-shirt on the front. That might sound a little different than usual. There's a reason for that. And typically I would fire from 7 yards. Today I'm going to shoot from 2 yards because of the lack of accuracy of this firearm. Well, the first shot bounced off the meat target, doing basically no damage. However, it did manage to startle our camera operator a little bit. Let's try another shot. So why did I forego the leather jacket skin and the pork chop pectorals we typically use? Because I knew I wouldn't need them. There's a little bit of a dent in our ribs, but the flare didn't even penetrate the t-shirt. So based on this rudimentary demonstration, I think I can say without hyperbole that if you were trying to use a flare gun loaded with flares in a self-defense situation, the shooter would be in more danger than the target. So it would appear that the anti-personnel capabilities of this flare gun loaded with flares are very limited. But earlier I said it's a 12-gauge flare gun. That brings up the question, could you load it with conventional 12-gauge birdshot or buckshot? Well, here's a 12-gauge shell, specifically Remington 12-gauge 2 3/4 inch, 1 1/4 ounce of number 4 lead birdshot. Let's see if it fits. And the answer is, it is a 12-gauge flare gun. It fits in terms of diameter, but the flare gun has a shortened chamber. The shell won't go all the way in, it won't close. The manufacturer does not want you putting full power 12-gauge ammunition in their plastic flare gun. But that brings up another question. If it's a short chamber, will it chamber in a Gila mini shell? And the answer is yes, it will. And I presume that if I were to cock this hammer and pull the trigger, it would go off. Now, because the flare gun does not have any kind of extractor or ejector, I can't get that empty out of there, so I'm going to have to use my Field Expedient stick as an extractor to get that out. But even though it would fire, would that be safe? Well, let's see if we can find a way to test that will both answer our question and result in me still having all 10 fingers when we're done. Okay, the wind has come up, and yes, we have a windsock, but it can't do everything. Such are the realities of filming outdoors. Now, I've got the flare gun attached to this tree with some zip ties. I have another zip tie around the trigger, and that's attached to some fishing line. I'll load the flare gun with one of our Aguila mini buckshot shells, and I'll go back some distance behind cover, pull the fishing line, and let's see what happens. And there we go. Again, I can say without hyperbole, I think that's more dangerous to the shooter than the target. And here's a close-up of our flare gun. You can see that the barrel is burst and there's a lot of cracks. Also, the wad that was behind the buckshot was still stuck in the barrel, which causes me to conclude that the shot could not have come out of the muzzle with enough force to have any significant effect. So the takeaways from all of this. If you had a flare gun loaded with the intended ammunition, flares, and you're in a confrontation with a dangerous animal, and you shot a flare vaguely in the direction of that animal, could the noise and the bright light frighten that animal away? Maybe. But as far as the flare projectile doing any significant damage to the intended target, no. We also see that loading a flare gun with anything other than the proper ammunition is a very bad idea. So, as always, don't try this at home on What You Call a Professional, and thanks for watching the Only Use a Flare Gun as a Signaling Device video.